What does it mean to be human? Think about it for a second. You may have thought of our incredible intelligence and technology, or our capability for emotion and empathy, or even just a less hairy bipedal ape. But what if I rephrased it to ask, what does it mean to be you? Now you may have thought of your hobbies, like writing and sports, or your role in your family, like a son or daughter, or even a quality of yourself, like being funny or charismatic. We all have an idea of what it means to be human and what it means to be you. But when we try to define it, we can come up with very different definitions. This makes discovering yourself hard, and arguably makes discovering humans even harder, because we can't ask the fossils these questions. So if there are multiple answers out there to be discovered, then what does it mean to be you? And what does it mean to be human? To begin answering these questions, we should ask ourselves, what is a human? And more specifically, what is classification? First, classification is when researchers arrange organisms into taxonomic groups based on their observed similarities. It's how we determine how organisms are related to one another. And these can be anything, from its morphology, behavior, or genetics. But looking at similarities is useless if we don't also look at their differences too. Otherwise, organisms would look the exact same to us. Just like how if we only compare ourselves to others, we'll miss what makes us unique. Secondly, you may be surprised to learn this, but the word human doesn't have an agreed upon definition in science. Every person has their own definition of what a human is. Some use it as just our species, Homo sapiens. Some use it as our genus, Homo, and everything else in between. But we can still agree on certain traits that all of us humans share. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to even study human evolution. Just like how if we only contrast ourselves to others, we'll miss what makes us all one. So in order to classify humans and ourselves, we must both compare and contrast with other species and people. But you'll see, even this doesn't fully answer the questions, what does it mean to be you? And what does it mean to be human? To answer this question, a good place to start is the beginning. The very beginning, when our own genus Homo was evolving. 2.5 million years ago, a new organism evolved, Homo habilis. And when Lewis and Mary Leakey discovered its fossils at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania in 1964, they proposed it to be the first member of our genus Homo. They thought it was the maker of some of the first stone tools that were dated around the same time. Additionally, they thought Homo habilis looked distinctly different from their possible ancestors, the Australopithecines, which had smaller brain cases, projecting faces, and larger teeth. However, other researchers were skeptical of this classification, noting that not only could it be possible that other hominins could have made those stone tools, and that stone tools may not be a valid way to classify the first member of Homo, but they also saw distinct similarities to the Australopithecines, with them both having a primitive brain size and large teeth compared to later members of the genus Homo. Eventually, the consensus considered Homo habilis to be the first member of our genus and the maker of those stone tools. But researchers today still question whether or not that was the right call. Because of this, some researchers look to more recent steps in human evolution, specifically when the species Homo erectus was evolving, still trying to answer, what does it mean to be human? Homo erectus was the longest-lived hominid, living from around 2 million years ago to only 100,000 years ago. Some researchers even proposed that any hominid older than 2 million years ago should not be classified as a part of the genus Homo, suggesting Homo erectus to be the first member of our genus. Homo erectus was found to have a brain case size in between living great apes and modern humans, and the shape of its femur was very similar to modern humans, suggesting that it could habitually walk long distances bipedally. Thus, it was aptly given the name Homo erectus, meaning upright ape man. And it was the most widespread hominin aside from ourselves, the first to travel out of Africa. Homo erectus fossils have been found as far as China, showing just how far this species was able to migrate over its time. Researchers were confident in their classification, but because of its long time span, Homo erectus soon became a catch-all bin, where researchers plopped many varying fossils that lived in this long time span as Homo erectus. Some looked more like Homo habilis, while others looked much more like Homo sapiens. Thus, Homo erectus was dubbed the hominin in the middle. This resulted in the same outcome as before, with everyone having their own definition of what it means to be human, or at least what it means to be Homo erectus. This gets even weirder when you consider that not everyone agrees about what Homo erectus even is. Some people only use that name for fossils found outside of Africa, and they refer to the African fossils as Homo ergaster. Some researchers argue that if Homo sapiens were able to spread across the globe while staying the same species, then Homo erectus could also stay the same species while migrating to new places too. But other researchers use Homo erectus' long time span again to argue for two species, since we can't know if 2 million-year-old Homo erectus individuals and 100,000-year-old ones would even recognize each other. But regardless of whether you call these fossils one name or the other, they're still in the genus Homo. So for some researchers, that means they're still considered human. It's just one more piece of confusion to this big question. Other researchers look to more recent stages in human evolution, not when specific species were evolving, but when specific traits were evolving, still trying to answer, what does it mean to be human? Some researchers argue two things that make us human are our culture and cognitive abilities, specifically the use of symbolism, which is the use of symbols to represent ideas or qualities. And you may be surprised to learn that some researchers say we have potential evidence of symbolism outside our own species. That said, others define true symbolism as being specific to Homo sapiens, and some even more specific. One example is Homo heidelbergensis, which lived around 600 to 200,000 years ago in Africa and Europe. They showed signs of creating artificial structures and even using fire, which is a major step in cultural traits. Although this hominin was more cognitively complex than those before, some researchers don't define these acts of survival as being fully symbolic, and therefore fully human. Symbolism is again the use of symbols to represent ideas, qualities, or states of mind. It is very individualistic, whether that be to an individual culture or individual person. But you probably have heard of a species that we do have potential evidence of symbolism for, and I bet it'll change your view of them. Homo neanderthalensis, aka the Neanderthals. They lived around 400 to 30,000 years ago in Europe and Western Asia. Some argue that their use of a natural clay pigment called ground ochre was an example of symbolic behavior. Neanderthals would treat animal hides with it, and possibly decorate their dead as a form of ritual before burials. We can't know if this is a true act of symbolism, since we can't ask the Neanderthals why they did it. Interpretations depend on the individual researcher. But even if it is, would this fully classify Neanderthals as being human? What do you think? Now we finally get to us, Homo sapiens. Some researchers only classify Homo sapiens as being human, not just because of traits related to morphology or genetics, but because of the thing that unites us all, and the thing I'm using right now. Language. Language is a purely symbolic innovation, in which we can express on the outside what we think and feel on the inside. This is also very individualistic, with symbols having different meanings or classifications in each language based on the culture or individual using it. Because of this, some researchers wouldn't even classify all Homo sapiens as truly human, because we evolved 300 to 200,000 years ago, which is before the first clear evidence of symbolism, and way before any evidence of language. The earliest evidence of symbolism in Homo sapiens comes from around 100,000 years ago, with geometric cave drawings and shells with holes, which were likely worn as jewelry. But even though this is likely evidence of symbolism, its meaning is highly inferential, and people are still using everything we learned to try and answer the question, what does it mean to be human? So if everyone has their own definition of what it means to be human, which one is right? Well, one can't be considered more right compared to the others. They all can't be right, but they can all be useful, depending on your question. So the definition of human, and you, depends on you, your own view and perspective, just like human symbolism itself. All of us question our own identity, so we compare and contrast ourselves to others to try to classify who we are. And although this could be a helpful gauge, there's no singular answer to your identity. But that doesn't stop us from discovering amazing things about ourselves, both evolutionarily and personally. And hopefully, by learning about human evolutionary researchers trying to answer these questions, you can finally realize that the only one that can answer what does it mean to be human and what does it mean to be you is you.